Alright guys, welcome back to another tutorial. We're going to be doing Unit 3, tutorial number 4. Okay, so this is the fourth tutorial of Unit 3. We're going to cover photosynthesis. And photosynthesis, by the way, is going to be the opposite of cell respiration. In animals and in humans, this kind of thing, we did cell respiration, which we covered in the last tutorial. So in this tutorial, we're going to cover how plants make their energy. And this is actually going to be one of the most important fundamentals of biology because this affects pretty much every other organism in the world. Without plants, human beings and other animals probably wouldn't survive, or rather, they wouldn't survive. So it's a very, very important function to understand. I'm going to skip a lot of this chapter. I was going through the first couple pages of the tutorial, and I realized that it's talking about just like plants and happiness or something. I don't really know. I'm not going to read over all of that. I'm going to skip all the way to page 7 where we're talking about just photosynthesis. So I'm going to cover the hard part. You can read 1 through 6. It's a whole lot of activity. It's a whole lot of very basic information. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to understand it if you read it. I'm just going to cover the hard part. Also, I'll be using primarily green, or maybe like, I don't know. I'll use primarily green for this chapter just because we are covering photosynthesis, which takes place in plants. So yeah. Anyway, let's talk about what photosynthesis is. I've already talked about how it is the opposite of, that was supposed to be an H, of cell respiration, right? So photosynthesis is going to be the energy production in plants. Energy production for plants. Now, some fungi do this too. Some other things do this. We found that photosynthesis is actually carried out by a lot more than what we originally thought. So there are a lot of like strange things like phytoplankton and whatnot that produce energy on their own as well. But for simple sake, we're going to go with photosynthesis is something the plants do. All right, and let's see. This is going to takes place in the chloroplast. So we talked about organelles a while back in structure of cells. I think that was in the first tutorial of this unit. It takes place in the chloroplast. Okay, so these chloroplasts are what's going to be responsible for that. These are essentially the plant version of mitochondria. Okay, and they are green. They're filled with chlorophyll, which, by the way, I didn't actually look over this mastery test just because photosynthesis is something that there's not a whole lot you can ask about it, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to cover everything that you need. We should be okay. But this provides that green color, and it is responsible in an important part for photosynthesis. So provides that green color. I don't know why I crossed out that G. So this is going to provide that green color. Okay. Let's see. Let's go on to page 8, and I think they're going to give us the actual process. Okay, so there are going to be 2 parts of photosynthesis. There's going to be the light-dependent reactions. Light-dependent, which means they need them. They're dependent on light. Okay, without light, they can't do these. And then on the other side, we're going to have light. You probably guessed it, independent reactions. So these do not need light. Okay, so these can happen in the dark. Basically, during the daytime, plants are doing a bunch of this stuff in order to gain as much of the prerequisites they need in order to do this side. Alright, so they're going to start in the light, they're going to collect a bunch of things, kind of like farmers plant a bunch of things, and then in the nighttime, the plants grow and that kind of thing. Alright, so these require light, obviously, so they need light. And they take place in something called the grana of a chloroplast. Alright, so in the grain, inside of these grana. Okay, and these grana look kind of funny in chloroplasts. I can't remember if I drew them before, but you saw all these little like discs and whatnot inside the chloroplast. I'll just draw one. Chloroplast looks something like this. So let's pretend this is a chloroplast. And inside this chloroplast, you're going to see little discs like this in stacks. They look kind of like pancakes stacked on top of each other. All varying sizes and whatnot, you know. And these little things are the grana. So yeah, these things are the grana. These, you know, the stack, right? So this is where your light dependent reactions are taking place. Let's see. It's captured and ATP and ADPH. Okay, so this produces ATP and NADPH, which is really just, you guys remember what NAD was? That was used in, oh, sorry, you guys can't see that. You guys remember what NAD was? It was used in glycolysis and whatnot, or rather, it was produced by glycolysis. This pH is really just part of this phosphate group thing that shows up. It's phosphate and hydrogen. Shows up every once in a while. It just is broken down into more stuff to produce more energy. You know, so that's all that really is. And then let's see, on page 9, it looks like we're going to go over light independent reactions. And these are going to take place specifically in the stroma. So, ooh. Okay, so each of these stacks, so these are stacks, okay? These are called grana, and they're made up of each individual disc is called a thylakoid. Alright, but I'm going to draw another drawing over here. It's going to be the same drawing, sort of. So like here I put like a bunch, right? So there's a bunch. And here I put 3, 1, 2, 3. Here I put 1, 2. I really should have put this like right in the middle, and that's why I was kind of confused as to how I should do this, but I should have put it right in the middle, but pretend these are the same exact thing. What's going to happen is light independent reactions occur inside the stroma. Inside the stroma. Stroma is spelled S-T-R-O-M-A in case that's hard to read. The stroma is all this stuff. So the stroma is just the outsides of all this. It's kind of like the cytoplasm of something. Let me draw stroma in a different color. Let's go with, I don't know, red. So here's a stroma. Alright, that's all the stroma. All good? It's just the weird space around the thylakoids and around the grana and all that such. Alright, and then they're going to take the ATP, so uses ATP plus the NADPH, so you know the things you got from the first reaction, it takes them and turns them into glucose or C6H12 H12O6, like that. Alright, so this process is called the Calvin cycle. So this is the Calvin cycle. It does not need light. This is the Calvin cycle. So after they've spent all day long collecting all the light and turning all that light energy and oxygen and such and ATP and NADPH, they're going to go over here and they're going to take the CO2 and the water and the ATP and NADPH, and they're going to end up with this sugar. Okay, so over here you're just taking light. That's it. You're just taking light and you're going to produce this stuff. Over here you're going to use CO2, water, and the energy, and you're going to end up with this stuff. Okay, so light dependent, light independent. Make sure you know the name Calvin cycle. That's a big deal for this. And you know what? I'm probably going to switch up the colors a little bit. This green's getting kind of nauseating. So yeah, let's go to page 10. Cool. And now they're finally going to give you the process. All right. So just in case you guys needed a full screen picture of this, let me get that in real quickly so that you guys have it. All right. Oh. Alright, a little more, a little more, a little more. There we go. For the most part, that's full screen. So there's that. Feel free to pause it. I'm going to go ahead and move on. Here is the chemical equation for how this works. So cell respiration has one formula, and then photosynthesis has another formula. Alright, so here's cell respiration. This was animals, so what color should animals be? He's red earlier. There you go. So we're going to use red for cell respiration. This is going to be that animal process. Remember, we went over it last time. But the one thing I was surprised they didn't do is they didn't give you the full molecular formula, but they're going to do it here when comparing to photosynthesis. So we're going to end up doing photosynthesis on the same page. It's probably going to be red and green, so Christmas colors. Nowhere near that, but you know, Christmas is always fun. So you start off with C6H12O6 and C6H12O6, and that's that sugar, that's that glucose, all right, that you get from the plants. So when you eat things that have glucose in them, or some other version of sugars, but we're going to use glucose because that's essentially what's going to end up in this process. All the other things had to be broken down to glucose before we can use it. So here's glucose, and then you're going to add oxygen. I don't know, oxygen can be blue here, plus oxygen. And then you're going to have CO2, and I'm going to make CO2 like black. I don't really know. So plus CO2. Alright. And wait a minute, that's not right. Not plus CO2, that's equals CO2. Sorry about that, guys. This is going to be equals CO2. Your tutorial didn't really have an equal sign, or maybe mine just didn't load properly. I was wondering what it was talking about, because just keep in mind, human beings, we breathe out carbon dioxide, right? So there's no way we would use carbon dioxide to breathe out carbon dioxide. That's weird. So pretend this was an equal sign. I apologize for that mess. So your glucose plus your oxygen comes out, and you get CO2. And we also do what else? We perspire. Okay, so this is going to be plus some water. We perspire, we salivate, we urinate, we do all sorts of things, but we give off water after all of our processes. And then we also produce, do I have a yellow one? No, but I have an orange, so that'll work. We produce energy. So remember how much energy we have from here. If you guys can remember from the last tutorial, we have how many? Should have 32 to 34. I'm going to write 32 for purposes of ours. Your tutorial says 36, which is true, but I guess it can be 36. So 32 is really just the ETC, that electron transport chain, which is really all I'm concerned about. But let's call it 36 for kicks. This is the maximum amount. It's not going to produce any more than that, because you're going to produce 32, 34, 36. But you could technically produce 2 more. You do produce 38 total, but you use up 2. You know what? Don't worry about it. Use 36. That's going to be your magic number for purposes of this EOC. I think any question they're going to ask you will be more along the lines of 36. Alright, so remember two magic numbers, 36 and 32. 36 is for the whole process of chemical respiration. 32 is just for the ETC. Alright, so just to reiterate, it's glucose plus oxygen is equal to CO2, H2O, and ATP. Now notice that this formula is going to change, and it's going to actually flip. If we flip these exact same things, we're going to get the plant side. I'm not going to go over that just yet, just because it hasn't showed up in your tutorial, but we will eventually write this on the same page. We've talked plenty about cell respiration. I'm going to go ahead and move on. Are they going to talk about? Good. So on the next page, I was really hoping they'd do this, but I really wasn't sure. So let's talk about photosynthesis now. So here's photosynthesis. On the same page, right below, it's going to be the same exact equation, just backwards. Alright, so let's start off with CO2, and you're going to have CO2. Alright, and you're just going to add water. So plants, you guys already know that plants use water, so this will be an easy enough fix. So they take in what we breathe out, they add some water, or rather they absorb some water, they don't just add it out of nowhere, sorry about that. So they use some water, and then they're going to produce, here's your glucose. Again, so I told you it's going to be a reverse of the other one. So you'll notice CO2, H2O, CO2, H2O. Also, by the way, they're also going to take light energy. All right, without light, they really can't do this. So here's light energy. That's not included on your tutorial. I'm going to include it because that's actually a really important part. Over here, I told you it's exactly the same. Over here you have ATP. Over here you have light energy. ATP and energy, or ATP is a type of energy. Light energy is a type of energy. Regardless, you need energy to start this equation. So C6H12O6, which is glucose. Just remember that. And then you have your oxygen. What color did I do oxygen? Blue. All right. So and then you have your oxygens. Okay. Your O2s. Technically, there are 6 of these and 6 of these, and 6 of these. There are 6 of everything, but I'm not going to worry about all that right now. You don't need to remember the specific numbers. Just remember what equals what. All right. So CO2 plus H2O. So water and what we breathe out, plants use it to create food and oxygen. All right. Hopefully, you don't have any questions about that. Feel free to ask me if you like, but that is all the chemical equation of photosynthesis and cell respiration. So if you can memorize just one of these, I told you guys Memorize things in pairs. If you can memorize either this one or this one, I don't care which one you like more, pick one, you can just flip it. If you flip it, you know the other one. Alright, so memorize one, and automatically you'll memorize two. Cool? Alright, so page 13 is some kind of quiz. Page 14 is going to show the process. Okay, so respiration and photosynthesis, I told you they're exactly the same, just flipped, right? So basically, we start with plants. So there's some kind of plant. It produces, or it takes light energy and takes CO2 and takes H2O. It produces food in the form of a sugar or glucose, so this high energy thing, a high energy molecule, plus oxygen. All right, so it takes this, creates that. Great. So now we're going to take this, put it up here. Cell respiration means we eat a plant, we take in some oxygen, we take in its glucose, and then we're going to end up with CO2, water, and ATP. They'll take that CO2, water, and then not that energy, but some more energy, we'll put it back here. Alright, and then we'll use light energy to create this. So you'll notice that in cell respiration, humans are creating their own energy by eating all this stuff, right? So we eat all our stuff and we produce energy for ourselves. These plants use energy to create food for themselves. So you'll notice that the only thing being used up in both of these equations is this energy. Alright, so humans are going to use this energy to go, run miles or work out or live, essentially, and that's what they do with this energy. So at the end of cell respiration, we use this energy for other stuff. It does not go back to plants. Alright, this energy has to be gotten from the sun. That means that this whole process can't happen if there's no sun. So if you live somewhere where there's no sun ever, I don't know where that is, but pretend you live somewhere where there's no sun ever, you will die. It's impossible to continue this process. Alright, so it's very important to have light energy or some kind of energy to start this entire process. So it is not a perpetual energy situation. You guys might know perpetual energy. There's a rule that says, you can't create energy out of nothing. So perpetual energy says that theoretically it's possible to have a cyclical process that completely supports itself. So like no energy in, no energy out, all that jazz. This would technically be able to go on forever, but this cannot go on forever without light energy. So this is that energy input. Almost every reaction, almost every process requires some kind of energy input. The light energy here is a big, big deal. Alright, page 15, they're going to give you all the differences. Well, we've kind of already covered that. So if you remember your last tutorial and you remember, where'd my notes go? And you remember all this stuff, you'll know the differences already. I'll just go over a couple of them verbally, but chloroplast for photosynthesis, mitochondria for animal cells, CO2 and water for photosynthesis, the glucose and the oxygen for cell respiration, the chemical equation for this, the chemical equation for this. So you guys have already definitely learned all of this information. It's just in a nice little table on page 15 for you. So that's page 15 of your tutorial in case you need a nice little table to explain the things you've already learned. Page 16, this quiz. Wow, they made this really, really simple. Okay, cool. So here is going to be a special lesson. Now, I'm actually going to put this on a completely separate page because it's actually called separate. It's called the alternate photosynthetic pathways. So alternate means other. Okay, so this is a different way of doing photosynthesis, or at least something really, really similar. Photosynthetic. Oh my gosh, I can't spell, guys. All right, photosynthetic pathways. Okay, that was way harder than it should have been. Alright, so there are certain kinds of plants that do slightly different versions of photosynthesis, and they're called C3, C4, and CAM plants. CAM stands for crassulacean acid metabolism. I don't really know. I think crassulacean is like a type of plant, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not really sure. I'm going to call them CAM plants for the remainder of this tutorial. So yeah, let's talk about what each of these do. Let me make sure that you guys have to know them first, because they offered you like some kind of weird little videos. So I'm just waiting for the tutorial to load. Oh wow, they led you to the wiki. Huh. That's interesting. Well, that's funny. So if you guys take a look on page 17 of your tutorials, it really just takes you over to a Wikipedia page to talk about these things. So I'm going to just explain them. I don't know if this will be on your tutorial. I don't know how far it's going to be covered on your EOC or anything. They generally don't cover C3, C4, and cam plants too heavily on the EOC. They tend to shy away from all of that. So I'm just going to give you a broad introduction as best I can. Let's do C3 plants, and yeah, let's do C3 plants in green because they're pretty regular. So C3 plants are fairly regular. They use a Calvin cycle. That's it. So their Calvin cycle. But they produce something slightly different, and I'm not going to worry about that too much. But basically, it's called C3 because they create something called a 3-carbon compound. It just has 3 carbons in it instead of your usual 6 and whatnot. It's just slightly different. The products are slightly different. The process is pretty much the same. It uses a little less energy. So it's still a regular plant. So C3 plants are pretty regular. You almost never see questions on them. C4 plants are a little different, and they're used by smaller plants, mostly like grasses. I'm going to use blue for this one, I guess. I don't really know why. So C4 plants generally, so this is like trees and regular stuff, right? These are going to be like grass or wheats. Grasses and wheats generally use this, and they have chloroplasts all over the place. So these just have a whole lot of chloroplasts. This one does something different with the CO2. The CO2 goes through a different process called acetate. It's like, hold on, let me check if this wiki has it. CO2 goes through this process called an oxoacylate. That's what it is. Oxo, duh, because it has to use duh. Sorry about that. Don't know how I forgot that. But it's going to turn CO2 into an oxoacylate first, and then it's going to use its extra chloroplasts, these like sheath cells are what they're called, but they're going to use that to go and eventually go into a CAN3 plant. So, or I'm sorry, a C3 plant. So C4s are still doing the C3 cycle, but they go through this process of using CO2 first into this oxoacylate and then back into the C3. It's kind of a recycling version, so this is slightly more efficient than that. It's just slower, so this is significantly slower, but it is more efficient. All right, so that's a C4 plant, and then CAN plants are probably the most annoying. I'm going to use these in orange because these guys are desert plants, CAN plants. By the way, that should all be capitalized because that's technically an acronym, but I didn't capitalize it because I don't know. I don't follow the rules. So these are desert things. So these are like desert shrubs and cactuses and desert flowers. There are a couple of those. Those are kind of weird, but desert plants overall. So basically, they close during the day, and they open at night. Alright, what this means is that they really only do their carbon fixation at night. So they do the C4 thing. So they do the C4. Let me write this. That orange is kind of bright, so I'm going to do this in black. So they do the C4 thing. C4 thing. But they only do it at night. But only at night. Alright. So they're essentially the same. They're very highly efficient. This is why CAN plants or desert plants don't need all that much water because they're very, very good at recycling their CO2. They take their CO2, they turn it into oxoacylate, recycle it, and then do the Calvin cycle process. But this is a very, very slow process. Again, it's highly efficient, so you can do a lot with very, very little water, but you cannot do it quickly. So that's why desert plants are generally very, very hardy. Also thicker, and they have to store their water in a different way. They have to ration out. Okay, so like I said, C4 and CAN plants are fairly intelligent cycles. They're very, very efficient. They're good at saving. So you can think of this as like those people that are really, really good at living on a budget. These guys are awesome at living on a budget. These C3 plants, they're really fast. Like they buy nice things, they have a nice house, that kind of thing. But these guys aren't anywhere near as good as this. So if something went wrong for a C3 plant, like water just disappeared for like a week or something like that, these plants would struggle severely because they would keep spending even though their budget's cut. So these guys don't do well with changes in their environment. C4 and CAN plants are awesome at reacting to lack of water, lack of sunlight, lack of everything. They're just better at dealing with unexpected things. Alright, so these are the budgeters, these are the guys that just are spending big. Anyway, that's the end of your chapter. Make sure to know the difference between photosynthesis and cell respiration and understand how they're entirely related. I don't know if these will show up, so I just kind of did a general version. Oh, by the way, page 19 kind of summarizes them a little better than I do. Oh, they actually talked about the 3 carbon compound. Yeah, my bad. Alright, so I thought the wiki was all they were going to give me, so I was just going to wing it. But on page 19, they cover the C3-4 and CAN plants a little harder, and then we're just going to hit the summary right after that. So feel free to take a look at 19 in your tutorial if you need it. So again, know your differences, know your light-dependent and independent reactions. Just remember you have the Calvin cycle, okay? So Calvin cycle is where you actually produce the sugar. So every time you see that Calvin cycle, they're just saying we're making glucose. And then over here, cell respiration, photosynthesis. And so there's that. And then, you know, there are the different points. Alright, you guys ought to be okay with this tutorial, or this mastery test. Let me know if you need any help, and good luck. I'll see you guys next video.